Andres spent 15 years in the United States without raising his voice, without drawing attention, without asking for anything. He just worked, washed dishes, flipped meat on the grill, woke up before the sun rose, and came home when it was already dark. He bought a modest house, raised 2 American children with love and discipline, and never, ever got involved in anything wrong. He did everything right. Everything. But none of that mattered the day a random police stop pulled him over on the way to his son's school. In just a few minutes, the man who had lived for the good of his family was handcuffed like a criminal, taken away like an unwanted burden, treated as if 15 years of effort and dignity meant absolutely nothing. And the worst part? His children, born in the U.S., were ripped from their childhood and thrown into a nightmare they never chose. Marisol, his wife, had to become mother, father, provider, and pillar, all at once, while the pain ate her alive from the inside. This is more than just a story about deportation. It's the story of a system that destroys in minutes what took a lifetime to build. And what you're about to hear is not fiction. It's real. And it could be happening to someone you know right now. The sound of the spatula scraping the hot griddle blended with the muffled buzz of the restaurant. It was Saturday, just before noon, and the kitchen was in full swing. Andres, his arms marked with faint scars and sweat on his brow, prepared tacos al pastor with a surgeon's precision. Every movement was automatic, practiced, silent. That's how he had lived for 15 years, in silence. Behind him, the manager barked orders in English that was too fast to catch. But Andres didn't need to understand every word. He already knew what to do. He knew when to flip the meat, when to change the garnish, when to ignore a customer's impatient glare. "You're a ghost, man," one of the American cooks had joked once, laughing. "Always here, never seen." Andres smiled politely. That was how he preferred it. Outside the restaurant, the California sun burned fiercely. When his shift ended, he caught the 38 bus back home. On the way, he watched the neighborhoods pass by through the window, swaying palm trees, luxury cars, young people with earbuds and urgency. A world he lived in, but that never lived in him. When he got home, Marisol was serving rice to their children at the table. Mateo, the youngest, was 9 and wore a Dodgers t-shirt. Sofia, 12, was reading an American history book. "How was your day, Papa?" she asked, not looking up from the page. "Quiet, mija, same as always," Andres replied, kissing the top of her head. After dinner, he went outside to water the plants in the backyard of the small house he had bought, with sweat and savings, over the years. It was a quiet victory, like everything in his life. But as the water soaked the leaves, he felt, like someone sensing a distant earthquake, that something, somewhere, had begun to move against him. It was an ordinary Tuesday. The sky was clear, and the breeze carried the smell of hot asphalt. Andres had left the restaurant early because Mateo had a school presentation. Proud, he changed out of his sweaty shirt into a navy blue polo, still with flower stains on the cuffs. As he was driving, he softly hummed an old Vicente Fernandez song. The car radio barely worked, but it was enough to fill the silence. When he stopped at a red light, he saw in the rearview mirror the flashing lights of a police cruiser. His heart raced, hands gripping the wheel tight. He hadn't done anything wrong. He always drove carefully. But the fear in his chest didn't obey reason. It was a conditioned reflex, old and visceral. The siren blared. The cruiser followed him for 2 blocks before signaling him to pull over. Andres parked slowly, breathing deeply. The officer approached, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. "License and registration, please." Andres handed over what he had, an expired state driver's license, car registration under Marisol's name. The officer frowned. "You know this license isn't valid anymore, right?" "Yes, sir.
I have a new one in process, he answered in English with a strong accent. The officer asked him to step out of the car. 2 more agents approached. One murmured something into the radio. Andres tried to stay calm. Is there a problem? Just a routine check, precautionary. 10 minutes passed. 10 minutes where time stretched like elastic. Then one of the agents looked at the tablet and said, coldly, "We have an alert here. You don't have legal status. You need to come with us." Andres froze. "Please, my kids, my wife." But it was too late. Handcuffed under the California sun, he realized, after 15 years in silence, the country had finally decided to see him in the worst way possible.
Marisol answered the phone in the middle of the afternoon. The call came from an unfamiliar number, and instinctively her heart tightened. On the other end, a cold, impersonal voice. "Mrs. Marisol Ortega, your husband, Andres Ortega, was detained today during a traffic stop. He is in ICE custody. We recommend you contact an immigration lawyer." She took a moment to respond. The world around her seemed to stop. The rice boiling on the stove, Mateo's laughter in the yard, the ticking clock. Everything vanished. "But he didn't do anything. He was picking up our son," she whispered, as if it were still possible to argue with the cold machinery of the system. The call ended, and with it the ground beneath her feet disappeared. Hours later, at a small local attorney's office, she clutched the papers with trembling hands. The gray-haired man, speaking quickly, tried to be straightforward. "Andres's case is delicate. He entered illegally and never regularized his status. Even without a criminal record, the fact that he has been here so long can ironically work against him." "But he works. He pays taxes. Our children were born here," she pleaded, desperate. "I know, and we'll try everything, but you need to prepare. ICE is acting more strictly. They want numbers, not stories." Meanwhile, Andres sat in a cold cell with other men who didn't speak, just stared at the floor. One of them, a Bolivian, muttered, "They caught you too?" Andres nodded. 15 years, and now this." The other sighed bitterly. "Ironical, huh? We spend our lives trying not to be seen, and the day they notice us is to erase everything we built." Andres closed his eyes. For the first time in a long while, he felt real fear. But stronger than fear was guilt. The lawyer managed to schedule an emergency hearing. It was the first step, small though it was, in an uneven battle. Marisol dressed in the best clothes she had, a simple, faded, light blue dress. The kids stayed with a neighbor. She didn't want them to see their father in handcuffs. The immigration court was cold, functional, almost clinical. There was no room for emotion, only rules, deadlines, and procedures. Andres entered escorted, wearing a beige uniform. When his eyes met Marisol's, both held back tears. He didn't want the kids to see him like this. She didn't want him to see her broken. The judge, a man with a neutral expression, read the documents. The ICE prosecutor presented the case as straightforward: illegal entry, unlawful presence, justified detention. Andres's lawyer responded firmly. "This man has lived here for 15 years. He has no criminal record. He has 2 American citizen children. He works legally with an ITIN. He owns a home. He contributes to the community. He poses no threat." The judge listened, impassive. In the end, his decision: Mr. Ortega may remain detained while we review his cancellation of removal petition. The petition will be evaluated in the coming weeks. Until then, he will stay in custody. Marisol left the court shaking.
Outside, she called Sophia, who answered with hopeful voice. "So, Mama, is he coming home?" Marisol hesitated. "Not yet, mija, but we're fighting, and he loves you all very much." Sophia didn't respond right away. When she spoke, her voice trembled. "I knew this could happen, but I never thought it would happen to us." Marisol, still on the phone, cried for the first time since the arrest, not out of fear, but because she had no answers.
Time in detention wore Andres down invisibly. Days dragged on under fluorescent lights, between tasteless meals and vacant stares. There were no windows, only clocks and memories. He spent hours remembering the house he built with Marisol brick by brick, the white fence, the lemon tree in the yard, the nights with Mateo asleep in his arms. He missed the smell of the kitchen on Sundays, Sophia's laughter when he teased her with fast English. But what hurt the most was the absence of sound, the absence of life. At school, Sophia began to change. Teachers noticed her silence, her lost gaze out the windows. "She's always been an excellent student," one teacher told Marisol during a meeting. "But now she's distant, like she's trying to hold the world on her own shoulders." Mateo asked too many questions. "Are they going to send Dad away forever?" "No, son. We're going to bring him back." But Marisol's voice didn't sound as sure anymore. Every call with the lawyer came with new demands, more documents, more proof, more waiting. In the third week, things got worse. ICE moved Andres to a detention center in another city, citing overcrowding, without warning. Marisol spent 2 days trying to find out where he was. When she finally spoke to him on the phone, the call was full of interference. "They promised I'd stay here," Andres said, voice breaking. "They lied. I'm in Bakersfield now. It's worse, much worse. I won't give up, Andres. The kids are strong." He hesitated. Can you still look at me without shame?" "Shame? Andres, you held this family together for 15 years. If anyone should feel shame, it's this country." He didn't reply, but on the other end of the line, he cried silently. 42 days after the arrest, Andres had his final hearing. The courtroom was packed that morning, full of desperate faces, lawyers with overflowing folders and fast-talking prosecutors. It was a line of lives in limbo, a line of goodbyes disguised as hearings. Andres was the fourth to be called. Marisol, seated in the front row, clutched a photo of the children in her hands. Sofia and Mateo had written a letter to the judge. Childish words, but heavy with understanding of what was at stake. The lawyer began his defense calmly. He presented proof of residency, letters of recommendation from community members, tax records. Then he read Sofia's letter. "My dad is the most honest man I know. He makes pancakes on Sundays, helps me with math, and always tells me to never lie, even when it hurts. If he leaves, I don't know who I'll be here without him." The silence in the room was heavy. But the ICE prosecutor pushed back. She explained that no matter how moving the story was, the law was clear. Andres had entered the country without authorization. He had a final removal order, even if it was old, and the government had to enforce the law. The judge, fingers laced together on the bench, took a deep breath before speaking. "Mr. Ortega has built a life in this country, a family, made social contributions, and has no criminal record. But this court is bound by current legislation. My duty is to apply the law, not interpret it through emotion." Marisol closed her eyes just before hearing the sentence.
Petition for cancellation of removal denied. Mr. Ortega will be deported within the next 7 days. Andrés didn't cry. He simply stood, looked at Marisol one last time, and whispered, "Take care of them for me." Then, without handcuffs, but already shackled by fate, he was escorted out of the room.
The flight departed at 3 a.m. Andrés was boarded with 8 other men, all silent, all with hollow eyes. It was a chartered flight. Only the crew, the agents, and the deportees. The country he had called home didn't even allow him a proper goodbye. Marisol and the kids had gone to the detention center the day before. They spoke through thick glass, using an old phone. Sofia clutched the letter she'd written to her father. Mateo cried silently, something rare for him. "I'm going to write to you, Papa, every Sunday," said Sofia. Andrés nodded, trying to look strong. "And I'll practice baseball until you're back. I want to show you my new pitch," Mateo added, sniffling. "I know, campeón. You're going to be the best on the team." Marisol, barely audible, said only, "We'll survive, but we won't stop fighting." The plane landed in Mexico City under a gray sky. As he stepped off, Andrés carried a plastic bag with his belongings, wallet, wedding ring, a folded shirt. No plans, no direction. 15 years erased, with a stamp. At the airport, a Mexican government worker handed him a brown envelope and an intercity bus ticket. "Good luck, Mr. Ortega. Try to rebuild your life." He walked out of the terminal, breathing in air that smelled different. The sounds, the language, it was all familiar, yet foreign. He boarded a bus to the town where he was born. He had no family left there, only old memories and streets where time had stopped. On the road, he saw fields, hills, barefoot children playing in dusty alleys. He touched the window and thought, "Will my children remember me as a father, or just an absence?" Exile wasn't Mexico. It was the slow fading into someone else's past. 3 months had passed since the deportation. In Los Angeles, the house where Andrés had lived still carried his scent. His room remained untouched, his tools neatly stored in the garage, as if he might return at any moment. But time was cruel to hope. Marisol worked cleaning 3 different houses, doing whatever she could to keep up with the bills. Sofia took care of Mateo after school. The boy didn't laugh as much anymore. She had grown quieter, older, too fast, not by choice, but by necessity. Marisol tried to appear strong, but at night she cried in secret. She stared at the phone, waiting for it to ring. But Andrés called less now, not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't afford to. In the rural outskirts of Guerrero, even a phone plan was a luxury. He was trying. He found work as a helper in a small bakery, earning the equivalent of $15 a day. He slept in a back room at the shop. On the walls, photos of the kids that he printed at a local internet cafe. Beside his bed, a letter to Sofia, not yet sent. "My daughter, I'm trying to come back. I don't know how yet, but I'll find a way. Promise me you won't forget me. Promise you'll keep studying. One day, when you're grown, I want you to read this and know your father never gave up on you." One rainy afternoon, Andrés met with an old contact, a coyote who worked near the border. The offer was dangerous, the route more treacherous than ever, but the coyote assured him, "If you pay, I'll get you across. No promises, only courage." Andrés looked down at the only thing of value he had left, his wedding ring. He hesitated, then placed it in the coyote's hand. "Take me home, because in the end, not even deportation,
time or distance had changed one truth. His heart still lived on the other side of the border.